We are going to cover fungi, right? As I think I mentioned, the College Board does not really ask questions on fungi. As far as I can tell, there's never been an FRQ on fungi, and there are generally like one or two questions maybe that have something to do with fungi on the exam, but they're not like directly about fungi. They might just use it as an example or something like that. But it's good to cover all our bases, so we're going to take a day to talk about it. In order to be classified as fungi, you got to have three things. Okay, first of all, you got to have absorptive nutrition. Okay, and what that means is that fungi are going to secrete these things called exoenzymes. And those exoenzymes are going to break down the macromolecules that are on the outside of the fungus, and then the fungus will absorb the nutrients. Okay, so secrete exoenzymes to break down macromolecules outside of the fungus. And then we can say that the fungus absorbs monomers directly into the fungal body. Okay? Exoenzymes are just like what they sound like. Exo means outside. Enzymes mean they're something that catalyzes a reaction. And specifically, these are hydrolytic enzymes that are going to break down those macromolecules, but they do so outside of the fungus, and so they're called exoenzymes instead of just enzymes. Okay. All right. They also have to have a cell wall made from, chitin. Okay, chitin is good for fungi because it is a very tough polysaccharide. And that leads to the outside of a fungus being relatively tough. Okay. And then the last thing that is a characteristic of fungi, really I don't think should be a characteristic of fungi, and that's multicellular. And the reason why I don't think it should be a characteristic is because we're going to put down here except yeast and the chytrids. Okay? And so I don't know why we make it a characteristic and then we allow for two major exceptions. But it is. So we're going to do it. All right. So let's talk about what a fungus is made out of. Let's talk about the fungal structure. So all fungi are essentially going to have three types of structure. The first one is going to be called hyphae. Okay, hyphae are these very thin filaments. Okay, and essentially we're going to see that the hyphae are like one cell thick. Okay, they're just cells that are stacked end to end to end, right? And so this is my thin filament there. Okay. Those hyphae then start to tangle up on one another, and those are called mycelium when they do that. So that's tangled hyphae. Right? And then the tangled up hyphae is going to be like, I don't know, like this or something. And then the last thing is called the fungal body. And the fungal body is tangled mycelium. And so, you know, you might see like everybody always, when they think of fungus, thinks of a mushroom, so we'll draw a mushroom. And sure enough, that's what a mushroom is made out of, is a whole bunch of this tangled up mycelium stuff. So it's a lot like when we talked about chromosomes, and we were like, okay, so we start with DNA, and then we wrap it up, and then we wrap it up a little bit tighter, and then we wrap it up a little bit tighter. That's kind of how fungi works, except for the, instead of being nucleic acids or DNA is the smallest part, it's these hyphae are the smallest part, which are a lot bigger than DNA. Okay? And then this will have like some mycelium that like comes out like roots from that reproductive structure. All right. Let's talk about how the fungus distributes nutrients. Nutrient distribution. I think it's go time for clubs if anybody's leaving. All right. So nutrient distribution, we've got two different types. We've got what are called the septates and the non-septates. All right, the word septum means to divide, right? A septum is a division in something, right? So a septate is something that has divisions. And so if we draw a hyphae looks like something like this. It's going to be roughly one cell thick. And the septates are going to have cell walls in between the cells, like this. But the cell walls have holes in them, like that. Okay, so let's say there's some nutrients up at the top. These are nutrients. Those nutrients can flow through each of these little holes here. In a process that's called cytoplasmic streaming. Okay, and that's effective because, like I said, if the fungus is really big, it can get nutrients to the entire fungus without having to have anything like a circulatory system or anything like that. Even though when you think about it, this is kind of like a circulatory system. It's moving things throughout the entire fungus. It's streaming around that cytoplasm. And the way that it does that is using its cytoskeleton. Contractions of the cytoskeleton will move the cytoplasm. All right. So then the non-septates actually have an even cooler thing going on for them. And that is that there's no big divisions in between the cells. In fact, there were at one point, because during cytokinesis it creates that cell wall there, but it then dissolves. Okay, so let's say you got nutrients up here. Okay, instead of having to have those nutrients flow down, you can have organelles. These are organelles. And those organelles can actually cytoplasmically stream up to the nutrients. Right? So it's not uncommon in a non-septate to see cells that don't have a nucleus, and cells that have 10 nuclei, and cells that only have 1 or 2 mitochondria, and then cells that have hundreds of mitochondria in them. It's just based on where the nutrient concentration is at any given time. All right, so that's one of the ways that we can classify fungi. We can say, okay, this fungi is a septate or it's a non-septate. It's very similar to the way that we classify bacteria, right? We can classify bacteria by their shape, right? So either cocci or bacilli or spirilla, right? Or we can classify bacteria based on their cell wall. So we can say they're gram-positive or gram-negative, right? So in a fungus, we're going to use whether they're septates or non-septates, sort of like the gram-positive, gram-negative thing. And then for the shape, we are going to use their reproductive structures. And we can classify them into three groups. The first one is called zygomycota. And this suffix on the end, mycota, just means fungus, right? And so this is a zygofungus. And when we name it, that's what we actually call it, zygote fungi. Okay, so what this looks like, here's the ground, here's some nutrients that it's living on or whatever. And these just grow up little filaments, and on the tip of each filament there's going to be a sac of spores, and that sac of spores is going to wait until it gets disturbed, and then it's going to blow up and send spores everywhere. Okay, they're very small. Like I said, they are all on a single filament coming up here, and so as a result of that, they look sort of like hair. So this is a zygote fungi, right? Yeah, those are tomatoes. Yeah, you should not eat those tomatoes. But you can see how it kind of looks like it's hairy, right? And the reason why it looks like it's hairy is because it's got that individual layout where there's a whole bunch of little filaments with something on top. Yeah.
So that fungi doesn't just show up.
Spores in the air. So go. You just breathed in hundreds and hundreds of zygote or of fungi spores.
Wow, thank you for that. That was beautiful.
All the time.
So are mushrooms gonna like grow in my stomach now?
Nope, not in your stomach. They could grow in your lungs, but your lungs are pretty good at killing them.
No,
Yeah.
anthrax is?
Nope. Anthrax is an endospore for a bacteria.
No.
Yeah.
Isn't that how they tell you not to pop those big things on trees that grow? Like, because you don't breathe it in.
Yep.
It can be lungs.
Yep. That's also why they say like you go into your house and you find like mold growing in the wall. People, their first instinct is always to go over and like scrub it off, right? But when you scrub it off, what happens is you're just releasing all the spores into the air, and then it's just going to grow someplace else.
You play sport.
I have. It's a terrible game. One of the worst games that's ever come out, I think. It's really bad. All right, anyways. Next, we've got Basidiomycota. It's called the club fungi. And club fungi is named because the reproductive structure looks a little bit like a caveman's club, right? So there's in Basidiomycota are the mushrooms, right? So they look like this, right? But then also there's another grouping that looks like this. So you can imagine that like a caveman's club, like, you know, if Ugg was here hitting something with a club, right? All right. So, and then the last one, the last major grouping that is called Ascomycota. And those are the sac fungi. Oh, club fungi. These are club. Nope, these are club fungi. So like normal mushrooms and stuff. And then I know what you're talking about. These are called sac fungi. and they are shaped like cups. That. And sometimes these are called puff balls because if you like tap them with your finger, what happens is they puff out spores from the top like this. Okay, and that is an evolutionary thing because when water droplets hit them, so here's a droplet of water, right? It makes them puff out their spores so they can fire their spores for long distances. The way that zygote fungi do it is pretty cool too. Zygote fungi increase the pressure, the water pressure inside significantly, so that when you touch them, it just like pops like a balloon, and then it releases the spores. All right, and those look like that. Some cup fungi. All right, last thing, let's talk about fungal symbiotic relationships. First one that we're going to look at is lichen, which is fungi plus algae or cyanobacteria. And lichen are really important because lichen are what are called primary successors, meaning they're going to be like the early colonizers, the pioneers of new ecosystems. So let's say there's a new volcanic island that appears in the middle of the ocean, right? The question is like, what can live on that? There's no soil, right? There's not really going to be organic compounds to eat, so what can live there? It's got to be some kind of producer, right? But then it's got to be some kind of producer that can survive on land, right? And so generally speaking, the things that survive there are the lichen. And the reason why they can do that is because the fungi are going to act as a protective barrier. So the fungi provide tough shelter. Okay, and then the algae and cyanobacteria, what do? Yeah, they make the food. Algae and cyanobacteria photosynthesize to make food. Okay? Uh, 17. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and call this, and I'm gonna like disagree with your book on this. So your book says that new studies show that lichen is parasitic or maybe parasitic, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and say that that's stupid. First of all, because I've looked at the studies and there's really only like 1 or 2 studies that have been done on it, and that's not really enough to make it a huge claim like that. And the second is that the studies were not all that helpful. Okay, so fungi is providing a tough shelter, and so here's what they did in the study. In one petri dish, in a lab, in one petri dish, they grew the fungi and the algae together. So they grew the lichen. Okay, and they measured its rate of growth and its rate of metabolism. Okay, and in the other one, what they did was they extracted just the algae and they grew the algae in a culture. Okay, and then they measured the rate of growth and its metabolism. Okay, and what they were able to find out is that algae that wasn't inside the fungus was growing faster than the algae that was inside the fungus. Okay, and therefore they concluded that the algae or that the fungus was parasitic on the algae. Okay, everybody understand the claim? Here's why the claim is stupid. What is the fungus doing? What's its job? A protective shelter. Okay, so does it need protection if it's growing in a lab inside of a culture? No, right? So what's the benefit of having the fungi around in the lab? Nothing. There's no benefit, right? But does this lichen normally grow in a lab? No, it normally grows in places that nothing else can grow. That's its adaptive advantage. It grows in places where there's no competition because nothing else can grow there. And the only reason it can grow there is because there's a fungus around, right? Does that make sense? So it would be like this. Let's say like the mob is after me, okay? And I'm pretty freaked out about it. And so I hire like the best bodyguard I can get. I'm paying them 200 grand a year to walk around with me and protect me. Okay? Good so far? All right. So I'm walking around, I'm living because my bodyguard's protecting me every day. He's telling me where I should go, where I can't go. He's tasting my food for me and stuff before I eat it. All right, he's a good bodyguard. Now, let's say the mob boss that was after me dies, and so now the mob is no longer after me. Okay? Am I better off keeping my bodyguard on payroll or releasing my bodyguard now that I'm not in danger at all?
Do you like him as a person?
I mean, I got to pay him 200 grand, so I don't care if I like him as a person. I'm going to let him go if I don't need him.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So that's what it's like. It's like I don't need this anymore. I'm not in that situation anymore, and so there's no reason to have it. But the fact is that lichen grows in those conditions, and therefore it's silly to say that it's parasite. Yeah.
How is the fungus supposed to live if there's nothing for it to like consume?
Oh, the fungus plane won't live if there's nothing for it to consume.
So then what's the point of the fungus going there if it's gonna just die? Not immediately.
Well, it doesn't. The fungus. So the algae and cyanobacteria produce excess sugars to feed the fungus. Right? And so they live one inside of the other, right? The algae and cyanobacteria lives inside the fungus and keeps the fungus alive, and the fungus provides shelter for the things that are living inside. So lichen are very strange in that we have lots of different species of lichen, right? Even though it's technically two species living together, it's like a species of cyanobacteria or algae and a species of fungus living together. We also classify them separately as species. We say like, okay, the lichen itself is a species and the things that are living inside it are species. So it's very strange. All right. And then the last thing is called mycorrhizae. And basically what happens is that fungal hyphae wraps around the roots of a plant. So plant roots and fungal hyphae. And this can go in two different ways. It can either be mutualism, where the hyphae is going to feed off of the plant's sugars, and the plant roots are actually going to get a benefit that is increased surface area. So plant roots increase absorption by increasing surface area. And the fungi are going to feed off of them, and that's pretty much what the fungi gets from all of its symbiotic relationships. And then the last one, it could also be parasitic, because sometimes what happens is that so much hyphae grows that it actually strangles or chokes the root. So roots are strangled by overgrowth of hyphae. Questions on that? All right, that's That's it.